Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Programmatic and ABM, a match made in heaven for B2B marketers. My name is Amanda Benavides, and I'm part of the marketing team here at StackAdapt. Before getting started, we have a few housekeeping items to cover, and then we can get the webinar underway. We're happy to field any questions you might have on any of the content. Please feel free to place them in the questions area of the GoToWebinar panel. We'll address all questions at the end of our session during the Q&A. If there are any questions we're not able to address in the allotted time, we'll follow up directly after the webinar. Just a quick note, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared shortly after we end. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Kevin and Anshul to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our StackAdapt Programmatic ABM presentation today. Just before we kick things off, I wanted to do a quick introduction for myself as well as Anshul. So both of us, we work on the StackAdapt partnerships team, and what we are focused on is bringing industry solutions to the StackAdapt platform. One of our biggest industries is B2B, and over the last couple of years, Anshul and I have been focused on bringing new and exciting ABM solutions into our platform and bringing ABM capabilities to all of our existing clients. So with that being said, I'd love to jump in today. We'll do a quick introduction of StackAdapt, then I'll cover off on some of the agenda items that we're planning on talking about today, and then we'll go through the majority of the presentation, and then we'll clean things up with some Q&A at the very end. So let's kick things off. So a little introduction about StackAdapt. So what is StackAdapt? StackAdapt is a self-serve programmatic advertising platform. We are an omni-channel DSP, so our focus is on helping our agencies and brand marketers to execute ad buys on the programmatic internet. We also have a number of industry-specific solutions across a number of different industries, including B2B, healthcare, CPG, retail, travel, and political. And today what we're trying to do is we're going to focus on some of our omni-channel ABM capabilities. Okay, so just to quickly talk about our agenda. So we're going to do a quick overview of the B2B ABM marketing landscape. So we'll share some information on some of the observations that we're seeing in the industry. And then what I'd like to do is also tie it to some of our personal experiences from working within the industry and speaking with our clients. Then what I'd like to do is we'll talk about what we view the account-based marketing framework to be. And then we'll jump into talking about some of the strategies that we'd like to implement and how you can work with StackAdapt to implement your ABM strategies. Awesome. So really quickly, I'd like to just highlight the B2B and the ABM landscape. This is a landscape that has been evolving over the last several years. Even in the time that we've been working within this vertical at StackAdapt, we've been noticing a ton of really cool and innovative changes across the entire industry. Just to summarize a couple of key statistics that are really exciting to us. So first and foremost, what we're seeing is that over the next couple of years, digital ads will become more and more the predominant channel for reaching B2B customers, right? So this is a trend that has been continuing all the way from 2018, and we think that by 2024, nearly 50% of all B2B ad spend will be within digital channels. In addition to that, we're seeing more and more customers and prospects starting to think about and ask us about how to implement ABM strategies. So rather than programmatically targeting a broad audience, we are trying to help our clients on setting up ABM strategies that are more personalized, right? So being very specific and deliberate in terms of who we're trying to reach based on the companies that they work at, based on the job titles that they hold, based on their seniority. So we're trying to get really, really specific with ABM. And we're seeing that in some of the industry insights, right? So 28% of the 2023 marketing budget is dedicated to ABM, and we expect that that will continue to increase in 2024 and 2025. And 2023 will mark the first year where more than 50% of digital B2B ad spend will also be on mobile, right? So you're seeing that there's a couple of really exciting trends start to emerge, and ABM is really the overarching strategy for how we can respond to and tackle some of these trends. Awesome. So what is the ABM impact on business, right? So we've gotten a lot of feedback on this, and we've also been able to validate this with some really important independent and industry research. So what we're seeing is that companies are investing in ABM because it works. Like I said earlier, the trend is getting towards more and more specific audience targeting, right? So ABM really works because you're being very deliberate about the audience that you're trying to reach. You are reaching people that fit in your ideal customer profile based on them being in the right company profile fit or them holding the right job titles or being senior enough to make the relevant decisions, right? So because we're able to now target in a very, very specific and deliberate way, we're able to be much more precise in who we're reaching and much more precise with how we're optimizing towards the engagement of those very relevant audiences. So overall, what we've noticed is that 90% of individual surveys say that ABM is really important because it'll allow them to provide some meaningful insight on who is engaging within selected accounts. 77% of people say that ABM drove 77% of their overall revenue growth, and 72% say that ABM delivers a higher ROI than other types of traditional programmatic marketing. Finally, one really cool stat here is that 66% of people say that ABM is significantly improving marketing and sales alignment. And this really makes sense, right? Because when we think about programmatic advertising traditionally, it's starting with a broad funnel and then starting to get more specific as you're reaching and engaging with users. That's what marketing has done traditionally. And sales has always been starting with something very specific, right? You have a customer list, you have a CRM list, and you're trying to reach and engage with the relevant people. ABM is a really good intersection of both of those things, right? We're bringing some of the specificity and precision to programmatic advertising, and we're bringing some of those insights to bear so that those insights are available to downstream sales and business development teams as well. So what we see is that ABM is really that really good intersection between marketing, starting broad, then getting more specific, figuring out what companies are engaging with your brand and your messages across the open internet, and then getting precise to, okay, what are some of the brands that are in your market, qualified lead list, in your sales qualified lead list, and then empowering your sales and business development teams to be able to go after those leads based on the marketing information that is widely available. And the solution to that is really ABM at its core. Awesome. So with that being said, we just kind of talked a little bit about some of the industry trends. So overall, what we see is that the industry is moving towards ABM. B2B and ABM are becoming more and more synonymous. So when we talk about B2B targeting, when we talk about setting up, audience targeting strategies programmatically, we're talking really about ABM, right? So we are seeing very promising signs with the industry shifting towards ABM. But that doesn't mean that there aren't necessarily hurdles to setting up and executing successful ABM strategies, right? So first, what I want to talk about is some of the critical factors for driving ABM success. This is sort of a summary of some of the key things that key market participants have responded with. This is consistent across a number of independent research that we were able to compile from eMarketer, from Bombora, from Bombora Fusion as well. And so these are some of the critical factors for driving ABM success, right? One is understanding the technology. So understanding what you're able to harness with ABM targeting and measurement, given that there's so many changes and innovations happening in the space. The other one is making sure that you're setting up enough time and giving yourself enough time to actually figure out how you want to execute a program, right? And this is really important because not only do you have to figure out, okay, what are the types of people that I want to reach, but you also want to figure out, what channels do you want to reach them in, what KPIs you want to tie to these campaigns, and how do you want to adjust these campaigns based on the information that you're getting from, your real-time campaign insights, right? Finally, thirdly, what you want to do is you need to figure out the alignment between sales and marketing. And this is incredibly important for a lot of the ABM campaigns that we're running today, because we also run a lot of, upper and mid-funnel campaigns, right? So even in the upper and mid-funnel, there are a lot of cool tools and innovations that we're able to enable in order to allow you to see, okay, what types of companies are slowly starting to show that buyer's intent. And alignment between sales and marketing is really important because you can be very proactive in getting your sales team aligned with, okay, these are the types of marketing qualified leads we're going to drive into the pipeline. And then finally, what we need to do is we need to make sure that there is an appropriate and sufficient amount of content, right? Especially if we're thinking about a full funnel ABM strategy, there's going to be tons of different creative strategies that you can employ, and there might be different creative messaging whether you're in the upper or mid funnel, and there might be different channels that you want to enable as well, depending on if you're running an upper funnel campaign or a lower funnel campaign. So there's a lot of things that you need to think about upfront in terms of, what kind of content do I want to show? What channels do I want to run this content on, and how do I measure the engagement of that content? And then as you get further down the funnel, you might even want to think about things like, how sophisticated do I want to get with optimizing that content? Do I want to think about personalization? Do I want to dynamically show content based on past user engagement, right? So there's a lot of critical factors in terms of driving ABM success. And what we find is that the best ABM campaigns, traditionally speaking, we think about all of these things upfront before we run the campaign, and that really sets us up for success. That being said, on the other side of things, there are some hurdles and challenges in terms of delivering a successful ABM strategy, right? There's a couple listed here. Things include budget, lack of resources and personnel. There is a difficulty measuring ABM success some of the times, depending on what type of funnel-based strategy you're running, and then also having the appropriate and sufficient content as well, right? Overall, what I'll do is I'll kind of summarize this as saying that because of all of the innovations and the availability of different technologies and different tools within ABM, sometimes what it can lead to is, difficulty figuring out, what is the best mix of tools in order to implement a successful ABM strategy, right? So on the one hand, it's really cool that we have so many cool innovations and tools like coming to the market, and so many innovations and tools that are available on the programmatic advertising side. But on the flip side of that, that can create challenges with, aligning on a strategy, figuring out what is the best combination of tools to use, and then figuring out how to measure the success of those campaigns. Awesome. So let's jump in and we'll give a quick example of what the ABM framework looks like for us, and then I'll leave it with some kind of final observations about what we're seeing from talking with our clients, and working on implementing ABM strategies on a daily basis, and then I'll hand it off to Anshul to actually speak through an ABM strategy. So what we think about is as the B2B funnel can really be broken down into 4 stages, right? Awareness, interest, consideration, and decision making. And for each of these stages, there's sort of a different counterpart goal, right? So in the awareness stage, what you're trying to do is identify, who are the types of audiences that you actually want to reach. As you get further down the funnel, you might want to be a bit more specific, right? So once we engage intent, then we want to figure out, okay, how do we optimize our content-based strategy for the types of users and companies that are actually demonstrating intent? And then as you get lower into the funnel and into decision, then you want to be really particular with how you want to engage with your clients, right? So I'll give you a couple examples, right? So in the awareness stage, maybe the main focus is to establish brand awareness, right? So in that stage, you might have a ton of flexibility in terms of how you want to target different audiences. You might not necessarily want to start with a fixed ABM list or a fixed CRM list, but you might want to just establish, okay, this is the type of persona that we think is going to engage with our brand. Let's target as many people in this universe as possible and see, how we're able to drive that engagement. As you get lower into the funnel, then you want to see, okay, has some of this marketing and advertising resulted in additional influence? That's where something like topic analytics could be really interesting and very, very useful for you, right? So imagine that you were a brand and your product was cybersecurity software. Being able to measure, the elevated level of interest, the surge in the interest around these types of topics and keywords could be very, very important to you, and can also allow you to tie together, how much of this interest has been generated by the marketing that you put into your upper funnel, right? And then from there, we can start to clean up that, that ideal customer profile, that target list, and figure out, okay, what are some of the accounts and some of the personas that are generating engagement. Then as you get lower and lower, you're going to get a better idea, okay, who are the companies that are actually engaging and that have been able to nurture down the funnel. Then you might want to get very, very specific with how you want to tackle that funnel, right? Maybe as you get to the decision-making step, you want to get much more personalized in your actual targeting strategy. So as you're driving users to your site and as you're getting information on, how these companies are looking at your products and services, then what you want to do is you want to optimize your strategy around driving that decision. And part of that could be thinking about, how do I use dynamic retargeting, for example, to actually show the relevant information to a user to get them to fulfill that final action and drive them to a conversion, right? So this is kind of how we think about the funnel. We like to break it out into stages. And then what we do is we're trying to identify, okay, what is the ideal response depending on the stage that you're at. Another thing that we also want to think about, and we've gotten really in the habit of thinking about, is we like to think about B2B decision maker as a cohort-based decision rather than an individual decision, right? So in B2B, this is where the marketing strategy is going to be really different than traditional B2C industries, where you're not just trying to reach a single user and drive them on a path to purchase, but you're actually looking at a broader decision-making committee, right? And the challenge here is that, based on some of the survey results that we were able to analyze, on average, there are 11 decision makers that make a B2B decision. And the challenge with that is not only are there a lot of decision makers, generally speaking, they all hold different job titles, right? So you might have someone in accounting finance who is a member of a decision-making committee. You might have someone in technology. You might have someone in sales. So you're going to have a lot of different people with different job titles that make a decision, and they might have different or varying levels of seniority. In addition to that, engagement is, fluid. It's non-linear, and the B2B sales cycle is really long, right? So if you think about a B2B sales cycle for an enterprise, software buy, that's going to take between 12 to 18 months. And there might be individuals within this, decision-making cohort that will show engagements at various stages of that buying cycle, but maybe they don't all show engagement at the same time, right? So the ability to figure out, okay, what are the criteria for determining that a company is showing that buying signal is about to make a purchase really has to do with how we view that stakeholder, that decision-making cohort, and how we actually look at the signals across all of the relevant people to figure out, are they going to buy or not buy? Account-based marketing is really the ability to get very specific, whether it's one-to-many or one-to-one in terms of who you want to reach. And we think about account-based marketing across a couple of different attributes, right? So it's essentially reaching your right audience based on the companies that they work at, the job titles that they hold, the seniorities, the seniorities of their positions, but it can also be based on, targeting based on a number of other factors. It can be targeting the right companies based on intent signals. It can be targeting companies based on, the firmographic attributes of the companies themselves, the amount of revenue these companies do, the number of employees at these companies, the growth stage of the companies themselves. So it's essentially a way for us to be very specific about who we're reaching in a B2B professional circumstance. In this account-based marketing framework, the things that we pay attention to are these things. So we think about how do we align marketing and sales. So on the marketing side, if we set up an account-based marketing tactic targeting 100 different companies, we want to figure out, okay, what are the criteria for considering this company a market qualified lead or a sales qualified lead? And we want to build those definitions up front. Furthermore, we want to figure out account qualification, right? So we want to figure out, okay, are we reaching people, and what are the common patterns for putting someone into a customer profile? Is it based on company size? Is it based on job persona? So for example, targeting people based on being, IT decision makers or finance decision makers, or is it some other type of qualification attributes such as intent or growth, for example. And then finally, what we want to do is we want to think about a go-to-market plan. So we want to understand exactly how a new customer will move through the sales process in order to deliver the premium experience to these accounts. And that's going to also inform our analytics as well, right? So if we understand that the traditional sales process is 12 months, and what we're trying to do is look at the signals across that buying journey over a 12-month period, then what we're going to do is we're going to design an analytics measurement and attribution strategy against the go-to-market plan that was defined up front. Awesome. So one thing I'll just leave us with before I pass things off to Anshul is there are a lot of things that fuel what account-based marketing really is, right? There are so many different components, and it's so customizable, it's so configurable. It can definitely be daunting to think about, okay, what is the best mix of things in order to actually set up an account-based marketing framework, right? So I won't go into too much detail on each of these individual things, but I wanted to just quickly show you, here are all the types of things that we think about that encapsulate account-based marketing, right? So on the targeting side, we need to think about things like ideal customer profile, buying persona, targeting a specific account list. On the strategy side, we need to figure out the alignment between revenue and marketing, so sales and marketing. On the planning side, we need to figure out, okay, what are ways that we can expand the funnel? how do we continue to figure out, okay, what types of accounts are going to be going into this funnel? And then from a content side, for example, we're thinking about, okay, what channels are we running on? What are the messages that we're showing on the channels? How personalized do we need that messaging to be? How do we want to evaluate the success of the engagement around those messages, right? And then one last thing I kind of want to talk about is the technology piece of it. There's so much of this that is now, powered by machine learning and predictive analytics and automation. So what are the specific technology solutions that I want to enable? And, how much do I want to rely on technology to help me build this ABM orchestration playbook? And how much do I also want to provide universal business input into that, right? So there's a lot of different open questions that, we encourage our clients to think through before we implement an actual campaign and then we execute the campaign playbook. Awesome. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Anshul to, give some insights into how to actually start building out an ABM strategy.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. So we started out by talking about kind of like the industry top down, but what I really want to focus on for the second half of this webinar is actually how you can put that ABM framework into practice within your B2B marketing efforts. So to kick things off, the first thing that you want to really look at when you're building your ABM strategy is trying to effectively understand your total addressable as well as serviceable market that you can actually capture. So that's really what's going to play a key role in both kind of your short and long-term goals for revenue, but also in actually identifying what your ideal customer profile is going to be, so that you can do that specific and targeted ABM marketing that we've been talking about so far. So you really want to understand not only what proportion of the total market actually has the purchasing power for a product or service in your industry, but also what proportion of that is practically addressable for your company. So how much of that TAM do you already own, and how aggressive your growth targets are, but also, how much of it can you actually actively go after? So identifying that TAM is really what's going to be able to help you understand what your ideal customer profile is going to be, like I mentioned. So do you want to actually focus on specific types of businesses? Are there firmographic attributes about companies that you want to go after? Maybe you want to focus on companies in specific industries. Maybe you want to focus on companies of specific size, maybe smaller businesses versus Fortune 1000 companies. Beyond actually identifying the types of accounts that you want to go after, it's also equally as important to understand and identify what type of persona you want to go after. So like Kevin mentioned, there could be up to 11 different decision makers at an organization that will be involved in making that decision about purchasing your product. So you really want to understand what types of professionals those are. Are they in specific job functional areas? Are they decision makers at certain levels of the organization? Maybe you want to focus on C-suite. Maybe you want to focus on, the VP level. So it might not always make the most sense to implement kind of a blanket targeting strategy at the accounts that you're the most interested in. Beyond kind of their job function, it's also equally important to potentially layer on things like intent. So you want to layer on, you want to target professionals not just because of the function that they employ in a particular organization, but also maybe they're actively interested in the topic that your product directly addresses. So those are elements that are going to be important when you're kind of formalizing your account selection process. Another interesting way to kind of get even more specific is layering on something like a technographic attribute. So what that might look like, especially if you're a technology-based company, is maybe doing something like a competitive conquesting strategy. So you might want to reach accounts because of competitor technologies that they're using, so you can conquest them for your product. So a lot of different elements to think about when you're building your ABM strategy, so that you can get as granular as possible while still trying to maintain scale, so that you're actually effectively employing your marketing dollars. So once you've identified all of those attributes, really that's what's going to allow you to reach the right decision makers for your target campaigns. So you can mix and match all of those elements, everything from firmographic attributes to persona attributes to technographics, to build a highly custom and highly targeted ABM audience that you can run for your programmatic campaigns. So this is a really good example of kind of what I've been talking about. You could potentially come in with a target list of companies that very cleanly addresses the TAM that you've identified. But at those companies, you want to specifically reach only director level and above. And specifically, you only want to reach director level and above professionals that are displaying or, showing relevant intent for topics that are relevant to your product. And all of those elements can be bucketed together very cleanly into a highly custom ABM segment that you can run, your programmatic campaigns against and use to understand who's going to actually be the most highly qualified lead that your sales teams can go after. Now, with all of that being said, kind of one of the challenges that Kevin addressed earlier on in the presentation is actually being able to measure the success of those ABM campaigns. It can be a lot easier to actually define who you want to go after, but a lot harder to actually understand how your marketing dollars are effectively, reaching those users and how those users are moving through that marketing funnel to turn into a potentially qualified lead. So not only do you want to understand, those general kind of digital metrics like engagement or conversions, but with B2B marketing, because of the uniqueness of the marketing funnel, or not the funnel, but because of the uniqueness of how long it can take for a sale to convert and how many touch points there are along the way, there are other elements that you also want to consider when you're trying to understand the impact of your advertising efforts. So potentially what that could look like with ABM is actually trying to understand how your pipeline is getting orchestrated. So you might have started with 1,000 target accounts in your TAM, but as you're running campaigns against it, as you're putting marketing dollars behind it, running all sorts of advertising efforts, you want to understand how that pipeline is getting more and more narrowed throughout those efforts. Are you actually starting with 1,000 and then narrowing it down to maybe 50 accounts that your sales team can actively go after because those users and those accounts are consistently showing interest and engagement with your product? But also, as you're running all of these efforts, you're running campaigns, all of that good stuff, you also want to be able to garner as much knowledge and information about your target audience as you possibly can. And that's really why ABM enrichment has been a primary focus for a lot of B2B marketers that are running digital campaigns. Because with every campaign that you run, you want to get more and more information about your audience. You want to understand that from this audience, what level of interest people are showing in your product. Are they actually showing intent for specific things over others? Because that's really what's going to help you optimize your strategy for future campaigns so that you can actually employ, strategic decisions as you're building those campaigns for further stages of the funnel, and not just doing blanket targeting kind of to everybody in your audience based on just who they are, where they work, but also you want to understand, what they're actually showing interest in. And that all of that really kind of culminates into what this slide is depicting, that what you really want to be able to do is segment your audience along the way as you're running campaigns against it. So not only do you want to drive users through the funnel, but you want to understand exactly who is moving through the funnel and who's going from being not engaged at all to actually turning into a sales qualified lead, because that's where you can direct your marketing efforts. But what this also helps with is for future campaigns that you might run, you want to equally understand who's not engaged or not really interested, because what that might mean is you might want to readjust your TAM, you might want to readjust your ABM strategy, but you might also want to put more efforts behind an awareness campaign that actually does generate a lot more interest in those users that are warm nurturers or not engaged at all, because it's going to allow you to kind of decide how you want to segment your dollars, how you want to put your marketing efforts, and how you want to direct your sales teams. With all of that being said, kind of echoing what Kevin mentioned earlier, at StackAdapt, ABM has been a pretty big focus for us. We put a lot of efforts and resources and research into understanding kind of what works for B2B marketers and to provide and build products that helps address a lot of those concerns. So what I want to talk about a little bit today is the StackAdapt ABM tool that is now live in the platform. I'll start by talking about targeting, and then I'll go into the measurement offering that we have that helps address some of those concerns that we talked about. So with ABM targeting, what we're really trying to achieve here is the ability to kind of reach those high value B2B audiences at scale. So because of the very robust graph that we have access to through StackAdapt, you'll be able to do exactly what I was talking about with building those very custom ABM audiences. You'll not only be able to kind of mix and match all of those attributes, everything from firmographics to persona level, but you'll be doing so with confidence that you're actually reaching those deterministic audiences in an authenticated way. There's not any sort of modeling going on. There's no sort of extrapolation going on. You're getting in front of the people that you want to get in front of. And that's really where ABM measurement comes into play and becomes super important when you're running these B2B campaigns. Now that you've built these very custom audiences, you want to understand, like I've talked about, how you're getting in front of these users and kind of who are the ones that are engaging with your campaigns throughout the way, with the end goal always sort of being optimizing your future strategies and generating those leads. So through the ABM measurement tool that we have at StackAdapt now, that's exactly what you'll be able to do. You'll be able to understand the impact that your dollars are having in a very succinct way and in a very customizable way. You'll have data at your fingertips that's going to allow you to basically understand how your campaigns are driving user engagement, which creatives are the ones that are being most effective in generating interest between your audience. From your audience, which accounts are the ones that are showing the highest engagement? Which professionals are the ones that are showing the highest engagement? Who are those decision makers that your sales team should be targeting to actually, turn into conversions down the line? And so this slide really kind of summarizes everything that we've been talking about and also kind of provides a really clean example of how effective the offering is. The way we do it at StackAdapt is we want to be able to be as deterministic as possible with targeting so that the measurement is as clean as possible. So you can see here in this case study that when we compare StackAdapt ABM measurement to third-party solutions on the market, we tend to kind of outperform in many different ways. The goal always is to be able to give B2B marketers a very clean and holistic picture of who they're getting in front of and how those users are engaging throughout the campaign. So if you have an offering that is focused on getting the highest attribution rates, that's kind of going to help address those needs. So with StackAdapt ABM measurement, that's exactly what you can do. So if you're serving 3 million impressions, you'll be able to understand how majority of those impressions are, or who the majority of those impressions are getting in front of, and how they're progressing all the way down to site traffic. Whereas oftentimes with third-party solutions, that's been a challenge a lot of marketers that have come to us have faced in the past, that they're not getting a full picture of kind of how their campaigns are performing. So not only are we able to build really custom audiences off of an ID graph that is able to reach professionals at scale, but because of an offering that's built in a closed loop, you can also understand kind of majority of how your audiences are performing. So with that being said, just some closing thoughts to kind of summarize everything that we've talked about. Just want to touch on a couple of things that we've addressed. So first of all, as we've talked about with kind of how the industry is progressing, we're only going to see programmatic ABM continue to grow. A lot of B2B marketers are focusing their efforts and relying more and more on ABM strategies to basically help address and solve a lot of the challenges that they're facing. And so programmatic has tended to be a pretty strong tactic in helping do that. Secondly, developing a framework and measuring success is becoming critical along the way. So a one-size-fits-all strategy for ABM marketing doesn't always work, right? So you want your success to be built off of establishing a very clean framework and use all the tools that are at your disposal so that you're aligning all of your OKRs. And lastly, being able to utilize a purpose-built ABM tool that is allowing you to employ an ABM strategy that's accessible, accurate, and customizable is really what's going to help address a lot of those pipeline development needs that we're noticing consistently a lot of B2B marketers are facing. So with that, that's everything that we have to chat about today. Maybe what we can do is open it up to some Q&A and address any of the questions that you all might have.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kevin and Anshul, for that presentation. That was jam-packed full of really good insights. So we'd now like to jump into the Q&A portion of the webinar and open up the floor to any questions. As a reminder, if you do have a question, please place them in the questions box of the GoToWebinar panel. So it looks like we have some coming in through now.
Awesome.
Yeah, so let's get started with this first question here. How are you currently using AI for B2B marketing? How are your clients using it?
Awesome. I can take this one. So that's a great question. So there's a couple things that we use AI in B2B marketing for. So there are a couple of things that actually were touched on a little bit even in this presentation. So I'll give a couple different examples, right? So programmatic advertising is really optimizing where your media dollars are going and making sure that you're reaching the right people working at the right firms, right? So one of the ways that we actually use machine learning and AI is to make sure that we're optimizing for ABM specific objectives such as reach, right? So if you think about, if you have, let's say, an upper funnel campaign and you're looking to reach a large list of 1,000 companies, optimizations are going to be made to ensure that we are reaching all of these companies, right? So that would be one example of where intelligent bidding is utilizing machine learning and AI to make sure that we are solving an ABM goal, which is ensuring that we're reaching all of the companies in your ideal customer profile. Another way that machine learning and AI is used is really the natural language processing stuff. So we talked a little bit about this in the presentation. So on the targeting side, if we are trying to reach specific personas or companies based on the intent signals that they're showing, that is built on top of natural language processing, right? So it's being able to observe the signals around specific topics and specific keywords and being able to then match those to the relevant people for the sake of targeting. On the measurement side, we talked about being able to identify accounts that are moving through the funnel. And one of the ways that we do that without seeing a form fill or a conversion is we're looking at the elevated response of different intents and different topics, right? So imagine that you were showing different media and different creatives around CRM software. And then over time, we're looking at the uptick of different signals around searching for CRM software, right? So that is built off natural language processing, and it's also built on predictive analytics as well. And that's another great application of how we use machine learning and AI for ABM targeting. I'll just provide one other example, and that is, pipeline scoring. So we briefly talked about things like scoring accounts for the market qualified leads. So identifying whether or not the accounts we reach can be considered a market qualified lead. And then we also talked about this idea of sort of next best action as well around those. So that is all based on machine learning as well, right? So it's looking at accounts that have engaged or converted in the past, and is looking at the collection of all of the actions that those accounts performed, and then is utilizing and iterating on that type of learning to make proactively those recommendations on the next actions to recommend as well. So those are a couple different examples of ways that machine learning and AI are used just in that ABM framework.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. So I'm seeing a bunch of interest here and a lot of questions coming through. So just a heads up, if we're not able to get to your question today, don't worry, we'll follow up with you directly after the webinar. All right, so we have a question here.
I should be able to have the questions open as well, but yeah, sorry, Amanda, go ahead.
Sure, yes. All right, so the next question here is, would you recommend different types of creatives for different types of ABM audiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll share my thoughts on that, and then Anshul, I can pass it off to you to also share some thoughts as well. So we would definitely recommend different types of creatives for different types of ABM audiences, but maybe one way to think about ABM audiences is to think about where in the funnel they belong to, right? So an ABM audience in the upper funnel is really just, do the people that I'm targeting, do they fit the persona that I want to reach, right? Are they, VP level decision makers working in the engineering department, right? And if that's your persona, then we're building an upper funnel ABM audience for that. But that being said, the reason why the creative, you might want to have a different message is those are not necessarily market qualified or sales qualified leads. Those are just people that are part of your ideal customer profile, right? So you might want to focus on a specific creative type. So let's say a video creative that we can serve in a desktop video environment or a CTV video environment. And you might be focused on messaging and content that is more upper funnel oriented. So the goal of that type of creative is ultimately to make sure that your brand is visible, make sure that your logo is visible, and to make sure that you're able to measure attention, right? So we're able to see, okay, did this person consistently complete a watch of that video? Like, did they complete that video ad? And over time, if they've completed that video ad a couple different times, then we know that they've built some level of brand awareness, right? But sequentially, as you move further down the funnel, let's say your mid and lower funnel strategy is more display based, right? Because once you figure out, okay, of these 1,000 personas, here are the specific companies and people that ended up engaging with my upper funnel video campaign, then I want to actually do some type of sequential retargeting within display. And I want to run a display campaign because on a display ad shown on desktop, for example, there is an actual explicit call to action, right? And then after that call to action, it's going to drive you to a site where then you might further engage with the brand, the site, or fill out a form or book a demo. And for that, you might want to actually think about a different type of creative where the actual text, whether the title and the text are going to be different. And you might want to actually personalize it as well, right? So you might want to actually make specific references to specific products or solutions where you know that that user had previously engaged with those products and solutions on your website, right? So you might want to be much more specific in terms of like the type of message that you're showing, and your call to action might be a little bit different as well, right? It might be a little bit more proactive, for example, to say, reach out to us to see like how we can solve this specific problem for you. But because you have a lot more signal data on your users, you're actually in a much better position to show that type of personalized call to action.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so next question. Will you continually be adding more industries in the ABM tool?
Yes, so we absolutely are. So the focus of 2023 and 2024 is to continue to add different types of ABM targeting. So to provide an example, some of the examples that Anshul kind of walked through with StackAdapt ABM is the ability to do firmographic targeting across specific industries. So what we want to do is two things. One is we want to continue to figure out, okay, what industries do we have more opportunity to build more specific audiences or more comprehensive audience offerings, right? So I'll give you one example. So one thing that we're trying to think through this year is, okay, we want to actually be able to target different small businesses. So I know small businesses, it spans a variety of different industries, but that's kind of one example of we have an area where firmographically we'd like to bring on, more audience targeting capabilities. So on an industry basis, on a firmographic basis, we're constantly figuring out, what are the types of additional data sources that we can, bring into our targeting and measurement solution, so that you can be as comprehensive and customized and configurable as you want with your ABM targeting strategy. In addition, we're constantly thinking about how we do ABM enrichment as well, right? So in addition to targeting based on the company and the job title and the seniority and also intent, we're also thinking about things like firmographic enrichment, right? So thinking about how can we target companies based on the types of technologies that they use, right? What are the types of software? What are the types of tools that these companies use? And can we get information about that for the purpose of doing competitor conquesting targeting strategies, for example, right? And then also what we also want to do is bring on other types of signals. We briefly talked about this in the presentation, but things like growth signals as well, right? So can we reach companies based on, how quickly they've grown over the years, right? Because as companies grow, typically what that means is that, there are need for reevaluating specific products and services as well, right? So we're getting very creative in terms of what types of signals we want to add to, account-based marketing audiences. And our focus for the remainder of this year as well as next year is to continue to bring more of that catalog into our proprietary targeting solution.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a nice little comment here and question. Excellent presentation. Thank you so much for all the information. Do we have the ability to exclude industries or job titles?
Yeah.
I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we definitely can. The way our tool has been built is that it allows you to be very flexible with kind of how you're building those audiences. So you can actually go in there and specifically select only the industries that you actually want to hit, or job titles that you want to hit. But if you also then want to build a specific audience, like an exclusion audience of companies you for sure don't want to reach, you can do that and kind of run them both in tandem, so that you're excluding the companies that you want to exclude, but still targeting the ones that you for sure want to get in front of. So you have the flexibility of doing it both ways, and it's all kind of very cleanly in the self-serve tool in the platform.
Awesome. Okay, next question. What channels or networks work best for ABM? So for example, video, display, native, or CTV?
Yeah, I would say that the recommendation is always to try and run like a multi-channel and multifaceted approach, because different channels are more effective at different stages of the funnel. So for example, a CTV campaign might be effective if you're running like an upper funnel awareness campaign, but something like native might be a lot more effective for like a lower funnel campaign. So generally the recommendation that we tend to offer is to run a campaign that has a mix of different channels, and kind of start with CTV and like move your way down to channels that are more engagement focused, as opposed to channels that are more like awareness focused, like CTV or video. So there's not any one channel that's best over others. It sort of just depends on the goal and objective of the campaign and kind of what you're trying to achieve with your ABM strategy, essentially.
Cool, thanks, Anshul. Okay, next question here. Where does LinkedIn fit into an ABM strategy when working with StackAdapt?
Cool, I can take this one, then Kevin, definitely feel free to jump in. The way we like to think about LinkedIn is oftentimes what our clients like to do is use LinkedIn as a very lower funnel like kind of tactic and strategy. So what they'll often do is they'll run StackAdapt campaigns against their ABM list, or your very customized ABM audience. And then when you start to understand from those campaigns which are the users or the accounts that are kind of falling within that lower funnel or that kind of sales qualified lead of that bell curve that I showed earlier, they'll funnel those users and those accounts into LinkedIn for a lower funnel strategy. So you can use LinkedIn very cleanly in conjunction with StackAdapt programmatic campaigns to kind of, address different stages of the funnel, and then to drive LinkedIn users only for the users that are the most effective, because obviously LinkedIn is a lot more of an expensive channel, but also very conversion focused. So that way you're not running those, 1,000 accounts against LinkedIn, but you're only focusing your dollars against the maybe 30 or 40 that have been shown to be effective through your programmatic efforts on LinkedIn for lower funnel.
Amanda, just one thing. I think there was a question that got missed at the top, but it is actually a pretty good question. I think I'll kind of jump in here. So we got a question here from Marissa. Thank you, Marissa. That said, you've heard that ABM is B2B. So is this just a catchphrase, or is it really just B2B? I actually did want to quickly talk about this, because I do think we kind of get into the habit of using ABM and B2B interchangeably now. A lot of the times when we do think about it, it is true that ABM is pretty much B2B, and it has to do with sort of the convergence of those two things, right? So the main reason ABM is really just B2B now is because the ability to customize ABM targeting, so based on job, company, persona, is like so widely available and so accessible and so powerful now that by default, most brands that are running B2B strategies are just running ABM strategies, right? So, we've even observed these types of trends happening over the last couple of years of executing strategies. At the very beginning of this cycle, we might have, done more just, broad, audience level targeting, right? So we might be targeting just a broad audience that we think is, all people that work in software, right? But those types of audiences traditionally, if we think about, general B2B audiences, could be, very, very broad. It's not necessarily 100% deterministic, and, you don't really know who's made up of that audience, right? But now, because these capabilities around custom ABM targeting are so widely available, we find that by default, regardless if you're running upper, mid, or lower funnel strategy, we're being very precise and deliberate about the audience upfront, right? So if you are trying to target engineers, we do ask these qualifying questions of, okay, do you want to target engineers at these types of companies? What industry are you trying to reach engineers at? What level of seniority do these people have to be in order to make a decision to purchase your product or service? And what types of other things do you want to look at? Like, do you want to only look at these specific personas if there's a signal that they're ready to buy? All of these things. So because these capabilities around ABM targeting are so widespread now, by default, it just makes sense to enable custom ABM targeting for B2B campaigns, right? So I do think, Marissa, like you are right that, it is very synonymous now, ABM and B2B, and that's why you kind of observe, even in this presentation or generally speaking, we kind of use those terms interchangeably.
Awesome. Thanks for jumping on that one, Kevin. Okay, so next question that we have here is, what's a recommended range of ABM audience size for a successful campaign?
I would say that varies on a lot of different factors, things like budget and everything like that too. We like to address that on a case-by-case basis, because, for example, if you have a, like $500,000 budget, but your ABM audience is so niche that the user pool is only 10,000 users, that's a case where we likely would say that audience wouldn't scale and you wouldn't be able to spend all the budget that you have. So we'd offer recommendations to expand it. And the same applies to like the opposite situation as well. So it totally varies. What we tend to recommend with just our ABM tool is to ensure that there's at least 1,000 users in every audience, but that might not always make the most sense given, your campaign goals. So it depends, and it correlates to like how much budget you're spending and what your strategy or how long your campaign is going to be running, who you're trying to get in front of, because obviously if your goal is just to get in front of senior decision makers versus if you're targeting like everybody at a company, it varies. So definitely something that we can talk about on a case-by-case basis offline if you have specific campaigns that you're interested in us providing recommendations on, but we like to say at least keep it above 1,000.
All right, so what ad formats have you found the most success with for ABM?
I can take this one. I think same thing. It kind of depends, and it goes back to what we were talking about of when we're building that framework, like figuring out what are the objectives of the campaign, and what part of the funnel are we trying to run a campaign for, and then what are the metrics that we're paying attention to, right? And so the example here is If you're running a brand awareness campaign that is much more upper funnel oriented, and perhaps what you're trying to do is you have this really, really wide net of personas or companies that you want to reach, and you want to figure out, okay, who am I going to sequentially, further engage and qualify as market qualified leads, then a channel such as CTV might be a really good channel to run as the first tactic, right? Because think about the nature of CTV ads, right? They are high impact. Really often, someone is sitting in front of that TV, they're watching an ad before, a specific program. You're pretty much guaranteed to, get some type of attention from them. And we are also able to deterministically understand, how much of the ad they saw and, what level of engagement they had with that video ad, right? So if, your ultimate KPI, let's say, is, way down the line after you run an upper funnel video campaign to, let's say, run a brand lift survey to see if the people that you targeted, have strong brand recall towards like your brand or your products or services, then an upper funnel CTV tactic would be really, really good for that, right? But if you've already, warmed up all of your leads, you're actually looking to run a more, lower funnel, let's say, lead generation focused campaign, and you have like a very specific type of person that you want to go after. Maybe that is a specific, ultra precise ABM audience, or maybe it's as simple as, you get 10,000 unique anonymous users onto your website. And what you want to do is you want to re-engage those users based on the type of product or service they engage with the ultimate goal of them coming back to your website to fulfill a conversion, which is a form fill or contact us for a demo type of action, right? In which case, display might actually be a really, really good advertising channel for you because of a couple of different reasons. We talked about this briefly, but personalization is a very, very robust strategy in display where you can actually get very, very particular with the message, the content, the text, the image that you're showing based on a past user signal. So our favorite B2B example is, imagine that you had a website where part of the website is you have a ton of, white paper content, right? And you've observed that there's a ton of anonymous users that are going onto your site and they're actually reading specific topics and specific white papers. Then what you can do is you can potentially personalize your subsequent display retargeting campaign to actually show some additional information around the content that they already saw, and then a more specific call to action for those people, right? And display might be really, really good for that because, as we described, there is a clear call to action. There's a way to interact directly with the ad. If we run display in a desktop setting, they're going to be directed right onto your website where they can actually fill out a form and reach out to a representative to get more information. And there's a lot more personalization and configurability that's available there, right? So ultimately, that's just a way of saying, like, it really depends on what the goal is. If your goal is brand awareness and engagement and intention, we would definitely recommend considering video. But if you're running a lower funnel campaign where you think personalization is going to be really important to actually drive that final engagement, that final conversion, then you could look at a channel like display, and then any combination of the variety of different channels altogether when you're running a full funnel strategy.
Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. All right, so we have about 5 minutes left, so we're just going to take a couple more questions before we wrap up for today. Okay, so what recommendations do you have for a landing page for an ABM audience? Do you recommend different landing pages based on personas?
Sure, I can take this one as well. So there's a couple of things. We kind of talked about personalization, and we know that personalization can kind of be broken up into two things. One is the creative personalization, which I just talked about, which is when you see an ad, it's going to be personalized to you and your past engagement. The other type of personalization that we've thought about and we've talked to clients about is landing page personalization. And that is also something I will say that we are kind of in the nascent stages of thinking about landing page optimization and landing page personalization, but definitely we would recommend that if that is available, right? So we have had situations where we've had the ability to run multiple landing pages, and what we're able to do is, because we have tools and capabilities to personalize creatives, we can actually point creatives to different landing pages depending on the user, right? So a very, very basic example, but it is a powerful example, is imagine that you were promoting a product or service, but you're actually targeting very different persona groups. You might be targeting healthcare professionals and you might also be targeting finance professionals, right? What you might want to do is you might want to have a different landing page experience for different professionals. And even something that's very simple to tweak is you might want to have a different hero banner for each persona, right? So your healthcare page is going to have, images of healthcare professionals on the hero banner, and then, so on and so forth for your other personas. And because we have the ability to personalize creatives, we can actually have those creatives dynamically point to different landing pages, and then it's just going to make that whole experience much more seamless, right? So obviously, like on a case-by-case basis, we want to understand, does this fit in terms of the ultimate goal? But overall, we've never really shied away from recommending personalization, right? So if there is an opportunity to introduce personalization to an ABM campaign, we've always pretty much recommended it because it is really powerful, and also powerful future-proof, like cookieless, solution for actually driving engagement and performance.
Great, thanks, Kevin. All right, final question of the hour. Are all features of the new ABM tool available globally, including all types of targeting?
At the moment, the ABM tool is primarily for targeting within the US. So, reaching audiences across the US from all sorts of different industries and functional areas and things like that. And you can actually use it across all channels and everything like that. We do have tools to be able to do ABM targeting and measurement in international markets. So if that's something that you're interested in, please do reach out and we can definitely chat about that. It's just not within the platform at the moment, but it is a priority for us as we're moving towards expanding on this capability and making more of our tools more self-serve within the platform. But at the moment, it is US only. But yes, it does apply to all types of targeting.
Great, thank you for that, Anshul. And thank you so much once again, both Kevin and Anshul. So that concludes today's webinar. Thank you all for attending today. We hope you found it both informative and insightful. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with a recording to all registrants. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any other questions you might have. Thanks again for joining us, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.